Welcome, everyone. I'm Greg Stanley. I'm here with Wes Warren. We're with Whitehall Management. We want to talk today about the future of dental practice valuation. There's a lot of talk about the possibility that dental values will crater, and it's just around the corner. And, on and off, I've heard things like this through my entire career. Wes, what are you seeing?
Well, I've heard the same thing. So for the last 10 years, I've heard that pending doom speech. So I've heard it too. And the things that they point to are valid. You got a bunch of new doctors graduating with a different mindset, meaning they're not quite gun ho about being entrepreneurs. So, as all you guys know, the new generation has different views, really work life balance. You hear all that stuff. And I interview these doctors. It's part of what I do is help doctors bring on associates. So I interview a lot of them. And I get to hear what they have to say and what values they have and all that kind of stuff. And I would say there's definitely merit there. That this new generation is not quite as gun ho as the last at taking on debt and buying practices. The other thing is these doctors, all of them, have huge student loans in comparison to just even the late 90s or early 2000s. It just wasn't like that. Obviously, university was much more affordable back then. So they're coming in already saddled with debt. So this disrupts the marketplace of potential buyers. And this is one of the things they point to. Another thing that recently has been pointed to in the last 2 or 3 years is the DSO market. There is some talk of pending doom there that DSOs are struggling to make a profit. And obviously, water rolls downhill. So DSOs typically pick up the higher end practices doing 2 million a year. Those are the ones they really like. Obviously, there's very few of those. So if DSOs have some kind of shakeup and they're no longer buying those practices up, how does that affect the rest of us down the line? And it certainly would. And so with the DSO market, is you got one is struggling to make ends meet and drive a profit. The other is the finance side, where they get their money. Obviously, interest rates creeping up tightens up the money supply. And that is the whole point, obviously, of higher interest rates. It dries up the money supply. And so private equity has less money to go out and buy practices. So that could have an effect. And those are the main factors that people point to, Greg, that they say, well, in 5 years, and let's take a hypothetical, a practice doing $1 million a year right now would sell for, let's say 70% of gross, around 700,000. You could get lucky, you might get 750 or even 800,000, but let's just say 700,000. So the fear is if I don't sell now, in the future, it might sell for and fill in the blank. Obviously, it'll have some value, and it can only go down so much. And I want people to understand this. So if it goes down a lot, that means there's more buyers available to buy it, meaning their income from that practice, buying that asset, can easily service the note. And all of a sudden, everybody's a buyer. So it can't drop to 400,000 a practice like that, because then everybody's a candidate to buy, because the note would be so small on that and it'd be so easily serviced. And so it could drop. My estimate would be, I don't see it dropping really below 60%. So right now, I'd say we're at 70%. In the future, it's possible it could go to 60, but much below that, at 55, 50%, the net income that these practice generates would allow so many people to be able to enter the market, to be able to buy a practice, that it would force the practice still to maintain its value.
Let's talk about, so these are market issues you're talking about.
Right.
Let's talk about your individual practice, the person hearing this who's seriously thinking about transitioning out of practice in the foreseeable future. They've seen some signs that tell them, their energy's down, time to reinvest, and maybe they don't really want to, don't have the money. So let's talk about that. One of the things we've learned, the bad news is maybe the market will go up or go down, but in the end, you as an individual only need one buyer. You need one buyer. But the bad news is that has to be the right person. It has to be a compatible fit with your techniques, the kind of patients you're dealing with, your whole outlook on practice and staff. So, first of all, what this tells me is when you start the thoughts of transition, you better start sooner than later, giving yourself at least an extra 2 years to start sorting out possible applicants, adjusting the practice itself, whether you're going to reinvest in it, maybe even move it, for goodness sakes, to another location. In other words, start sooner. The days of waiting to the last minute and hoping for top dollar, that's pretty optimistic. And I don't think you and I are seeing it that way anymore. So yes, we've got to find one buyer. Let's start sooner. But let's be realistic. If that buyer's still in school, hasn't got a license yet, things like that, it's not that we can't consider them. You just have to keep looking. We have to keep sifting the sand to find somebody that wants to work in your area, work like you do, and has the hallmarks of success, you know, a good work ethic, a sense of right and wrong and fair and all of that. So we're going to probably be starting sooner. Get over that idea that you have missed the boat, because the people that made money, like ridiculous money on DSO takeouts, and really lived to tell about it, walked away with 3 times what their practice was worth, that was almost like lottery winners. There were a handful, and there's a big deal made about them, but in truth, you didn't miss any boat. That was just a one-off. So you got to find the right buyer. You got to be realistic about your price. You got to keep your mind open to what the values are. And you don't look at what people are asking for practices. You look at what people are paying for practices. There's a big difference there. So above all, we're going to start sooner.
Can I comment on the start sooner,
Yeah,
Greg?
please.
The start sooner thing, I think that you have to be aware as far as what I would suggest is that you start sooner in creating a practice that's more general dentistry. In general dentistry, so everybody has their little things they enjoy and like to do, but you want to just build up that bread and butter base, and that's just clearly, obviously, crown and bridge, but more fundamentally is the hygiene. So building up the hygiene following, making sure that you've got a lot of active patient base. So the one thing that'll drive your practice down in value or make it more difficult to sell is if you're producing a large amount off of a narrow patient base. If that's out of kilter, it can be difficult to sell now or even 20 years ago, and it will be difficult in the years to come if you've got a narrow patient base or a practice that is unique in that way, where it's not just a normal bread and butter general dental practice. So in building up, like you said, preparing to sell, that's what I'd be looking at doing, is really investing in really hygiene, building up the patient base, and shifting the production into that bread and butter model. That'll give you the wider range of people that can buy your practice, right, and give you the highest valuations.
Period. Something you were saying earlier was, if for some reason you're having trouble finding the right person, and this comes about as you've got a practice that for 35 or 45 years has evolved into something very unique where you really can't find somebody to take it over. Never forget, just staying in there a few more years gives you the income takeout you could have hoped to got from a sale. So if you can stay with it a while. In fact, I think of the doctor who's betting on a big takeout to save their financial picture. Maybe they went through a divorce late in life. Some reason they've really had their their marker moved back to the beginning. Keep in mind, if you can stay at it longer, you can take out the same money you would have got on a really good cash out. So my hope is you can have both.
So take the story that I just laid out. Practice worth 700,000. It's grossing $1 million. Uh, and let's say it does just crater like we're talking about. And practices are like that are only worth 500,000, which would be quite a cratering in the marketplace. That's 200,000 you lost, right? If you would have sold now, you'd get that 200,000. If you waited and sold 3 years from now, you'd lose it. The thing that you're talking about here, Craig, is that you earned money those 3 years of about 300 or 350 a year operating that practice. That's $1 million that you'd have by staying. So it's up. The practice would have to literally go to nothing value, meaning zero, for you to come out better selling now. So worrying about practice valuations in the future and letting that cloud your judgment as far as when you want to retire is something I would never do. There's been many times when I've looked at the markets and and said, "Oh, this is inflation's coming," or "No, it's not," or "Housing prices are gonna." I thought housing prices were gonna drop dramatically in COVID. Well, they did the opposite. I've been wrong so much. You just can't guess how these things are gonna come out, and I would not base your decisions on that because staying in practice always pays off rather than selling. It just does.
I think there's a great lesson to be learned from that. Another thing, if you have the time and interest, pull up a YouTube that shows a harbor pilot getting off their harbor boat onto the big giant cruise ship or tanker or whatever that they're going to pilot. They get alongside, going the same speed. They step off very carefully onto moving boats. That's kind of the way it is that what we're going to be doing. Let's get an associate. Let's get up to speed and gently, gradually, carefully step off, onto something better. So start sooner, find a good person that's an associate. If you have to get 2 or 3 associates to sort through and find one that's a good fit for ownership. And let me tell you, who will tell you quickly is your own staff and your patients. I like this person. They're great.
If you've kind of built the white elephant, a practice that's tough to sell because maybe it's too large, or that you're doing narrow things that not a lot of people are qualified to do, quite frankly, you've got a couple approaches, and they are longer transitions. Meaning you've got to bring people in, get doctors up to speed and comfortable with the dentistry you're doing, train them obviously on that dentistry so they could support the practice. And then you've got a buyer, right? The other model is if you build kind of a big juggernaut bread and butter dentistry practice, you've got to bring in sometimes a couple potential buyers, meaning you're going to sell out to and create a partnership where multiple doctors buy your practice. All these things can be solved. So don't think that you're boxed in. Sometimes it takes a little know-how and creativity. Certainly with our experience, we can point you in the right direction of which angle you should go for. But certainly you got to think about it at least 2 years and start planning 2 to 3 years before you're actually thinking about exiting. So
Good. So get on the phone with us and let's talk about what you want to happen in your own practice, what you really want, what you want bad enough to make a few changes for. Sometimes reinvesting is totally in the cards. Sometimes it's better to just write it to the bottom. So I think if we talk through it, we can help you decide exactly what to do.
Yeah, each situation's different, We've seen a lot of doctors play out over the years as far as how they retired, how they transitioned, and which ones work best and which ones don't, how you should go about it. If you've got questions about it, that's what we're here for. We offer a free consultation. We'll walk you through it. We won't charge anything for that, and we'll give you all the information that we can to really help you out. So schedule. There's a link that you can schedule to talk with Greg and myself about your situation.
Thanks for listening.
All right, thanks.